multiple space flight with shorter recovery time affects brain. Space flight experience, in particular longer missions and shorter intermission recovery time, induce fluid changes in the brain. That may not return to normal before subsequent flights. Reports a study published in Scientific Reports. When ventricles, cavities in the brain filled with cerebrospinal fluid, expands increasingly with lower space flight missions up to 6 months, and intermission intervals of less than 3 years may not allow sufficient time for the ventricle to fully recover. Space flights induces widespread changes in the brain, including ventricle swelling expansion, but it is unclear if these changes differ with verifying missions duration or number of previous space flights missions. And colleagues scanned the brain of 30 astronauts using MRI pre and post space flight, including those on 2-week missions, 6-month missions, and longer. They found that longer space flight missions resulted in greater ventricular enlargement, which tapered off after 6 months in space. There were no statistically reliable associations between the number of previous missions completed and post-flight gray matter volume shifts or ventricular volume changes. The authors found that for 11 astronauts who had more than 3 years to recover, in between missions, there was an associated increase in ventricular volume after their most recent mission. The authors found that in 7 astronauts who had a shorter recovery time in between missions, there was little to no enlargement of the ventricular post-flight compared to pre-flight. They proposed that less than 3 years between space flights may not be enough time to allow ventriculars to recover their compensatory capacity to accommodate the increase in intracranial fluid, and they remain enlarged when the astronauts return to space within this time frame. Among the experienced astronauts, the number of years since the previous mission was significantly associated with post-flight volume changes for all 4 ventricles. Larger time between the successive missions was associated with greater increase in left and right lateral and third ventricles volumes following spaceflight. The fourth ventricle showed the opposite pattern, with longer intermissions delays being associated with greater volumetric decreases following spaceflight. They are right. As the frequency and the duration of spaceflight increases, the finding shows how spaceflight experience both may influence the frequency and the duration of spaceflight increases